And we drove into the city, and we knew going to Turner that we would not be back in the Garden. 2 reasons: more money and less dates.
I felt like I sold out. I wanted that guaranteed money to secure my kid's future. Say goodbye to the bad guy.
Here comes Triple H. Here comes Razor, who had a match earlier in the night. Like, what the hell is this?
People were going ballistic. I'm watching this and what the hell is going on?
The Kliq was an insult to our business. If they had done that in the 70s, early 80s, they'd all 4 fingers beat out of them.
Because it broke the mold of the way someone leaves.
I understand how much those guys cared about each other. But you know what, man? You're on the grandest stage of them all, and you're gonna piss on it?
Good guys and bad guys don't start hugging each other back in the day in Madison Square Garden. That's bullshit, man.
May 19th, 1996, Madison Square Garden. An untelevised house show that would become one of the most infamous and pivotal nights in professional wrestling history. 4 friends, at the height of their influence, shattered a sacred rule of the business, and the shockwaves are still felt today. This is the story of the Curtain Call, an unscripted goodbye that rewrote the future of pro wrestling. The early to mid-90s was a rough time for the WWF. Business was down in comparison to previous years, talent was being aggressively poached by Ted Turner's World Championship Wrestling, and general interest in the WWF was getting lower and lower as the years went on. Vince McMahon needed new stars. He began pushing a new generation concept that focused on young talent, and a group of very talented yet undeniably cocky wrestlers were about to step up to the plate. They were given the name The Kliq by their peers, and at its core were Shawn Michaels, Kevin Nash, who wrestled as Diesel, Scott Hall, the charismatic bad guy Razor Ramon, who oozed machismo and is infinitely more cooler than you could ever dream of being, the young and agile Sean Waltman, then known as the 1-2-3 Kid, and then you had newcomer Paul Levesque portraying the Connecticut blue blood Hunter Hearst Helmsley. They weren't just work colleagues, they were a tight-knit brotherhood, navigating the grueling road schedule together, sharing secrets, partying together, generally being unbearable for those they worked against, and, by their own admission, pushing the boundaries of backstage politics. We loved the business, we talked the business 24/7, we lived the business. It was a Shark Tank mentality. We made a pact, the 5 of us, saying that if we stay strong and don't turn on each other, nobody else can f*** with us. They, the office, always fucking worked the boys against the boys, and we were the first guys to say, f*** that, man. When we started getting payoffs, instead of being like the rest of the boys that would answer, what did you get with, oh, I'm not saying, we'd get a payoff for Survivor Series, and I'd say, what's your payoff? And Shawn would say, I got 40 grand. I'd say, fucking 40 grand, I got 10, I was in the same match. All of a sudden, JJ Dillon made the call over to Vince and said, hey, these guys are talking. This gives us insight into how the Kliq carried on backstage. There's no doubt here at all that they like to ruffle feathers and they like to stir things up. On top of this though, and what made things difficult for their detractors backstage, is the fact that they weren't afraid to let Vince McMahon know their worth. Kev recalls their tactics, saying, now we're calling ourselves the Kliq. We'd go to the arenas early and put a sign on the door that said Kliq locker room and then go leave and eat. When the boys would come back, they'd think the office put the sign up. We just stirred shit. We'd come back and say, oh no, we don't need our own locker room, take it down, come on in guys. They really thought that we were getting special treatment. We knew right then that we had Vince's ear. He knew that all we were trying to do is to make the best product we could. We weren't trying to hurt anybody. But not everyone saw the Kliq's actions as simple tomfoolery. Many in the locker room felt they used their power in a rather destructive manner, taking opportunities and even livelihoods away from others. Bam Bam Bigelow was one of their most outspoken critics. Bam Bam said, everything was strength in numbers, and they had numbers. You know, you had Diesel, you had Michaels and Helmsley, or Triple H, whatever the hell his name is now. Scott Hall, this group of guys that were actually telling Vince McMahon what to do. A terrible, terrible time. It hurt a lot of people. To them, it became a joke because they had control. So it was like, okay, let's f with this guy now. Okay, well, we got him out. Let's go to this guy and ruin his life and get him fired. And that's what they did. They just toyed with people's emotions and toyed with people's livelihood. Nash, however, maintained that the Kliq prioritised talent in the overall product, even if they didn't personally like someone. We didn't like Bam Bam as a guy, we thought he was a dick, but could he play on our team when it came time to being a worker? F yeah, he could go, he was money. We didn't care about whether or not we liked you in the bar. Many others have talked about their issues with the Kliq, and many stories have been reported online about how they acted backstage. None of this is news, and none of this should be surprising. The group was extremely talented in the ring, but they weren't held in such high regard backstage by their peers. As the Kliq solidified their power in the WWF, Eric Bischoff and WCW were making waves with Ted Turner's immense financial backing. They began offering WWF talent unprecedented deals, or more specifically, guaranteed contracts, a rarity at the time that protected wrestlers from financial ruin due to injury or inconsistent booking. A good thing, by the way. Scott Hall and Kevin Nash were targeted by WCW, their WWF contracts were coming to an end, and these two members of the Kliq found themselves in a bit of a conundrum. I really wanted to stay. I remember asking, Vince, does my ring work need improvement? He went, oh, absolutely not, I'm happy with your ring skills. I said, is it my microphone skills? He goes, no, you're one of the best talkers we've got. I said, I'm just curious because my pay has kind of plateaued over the last few years and I'm wondering what I could do to make big money like the guys who preceded me. He knew then that something was up. I said, look Vince, I know how it works. There's only so much revenue from house shows and pay-per-views, but what about merchandise? Can I have more of the merchandise? He said no. I remember telling Vince, thank you for being so generous and paying me so well, but what good's the money if I never get to spend it? I'm never at home. I'm spending all my time entertaining other people's kids, and I've 2 kids at home that I'm growing estranged from because I'm always gone. The offers from WCW were too substantial to ignore. Bigger money, more days off. Scott and Kevin both had families, it made sense to leave. Big Kev also approached McMahon because he too didn't want to leave. Nash said, Vince just kinda looked at me and gulped. He took like 4 or 5 steps away and slowly turned around like Clint Eastwood in High Plains Drifter and said, I thought we were family. I said, we are man, but I've got a wife at home who's 7 months pregnant and it's pretty fucking hard to run a family waiting on whether or not you're going to be booked at WrestleMania and have a good year or not. I could have stayed. All they had to do was match Turner's deal and they wouldn't do it. I'm a businessman and a family man, but I'm a pro wrestler too. I was playing for the New York Yankees and I was going down to the Toledo Mud Hens. I may have been getting double the bank, but there was no way on God's green earth that there was a perception that WCW was anything but a second-rate pro wrestling company, period. 2 of the WWF's biggest stars were going to Atlanta, meaning that this would be the end of the Kliq. All that remained was their final show, an untelevised event at Madison Square Garden. For the Kliq, this just wasn't another date on the calendar, it was the end of an era for their tight-knit group in its current form. The night of May 19th, 1996 at Madison Square Garden would serve as Kevin Nash and Scott Hall's last contracted appearance for the World Wrestling Federation before their high-profile jump to rival WCW. The event was an untelevised show which perhaps encouraged what was to come, like if this was a TV taping, it probably never would have happened. In my first match in Madison Square Garden, the arena was half full. My last match there, the place was sold out. We knew we were going on to WCW to see what lay in front of us there, and we felt we had to say goodbye to the WWF fans. At that point, the internet was such a huge deal. A lot of the marks didn't know I was leaving, but about half the arena did know. People were chanting please don't go as I walked to the ring. Hall wrestled earlier in the night, losing the fellow Kliq member Hunter Hearst Helmsley. As the crowd chanted "You sold out" at the departing Hall, he gestured towards Vince McMahon, who at this time was near the curtain, and he mouthed that he would stay if the money was right. McMahon, according to Hall, simply looked down. Now I'm feeling like such a mark for myself. I grabbed the mic and my standard gimmick was say hello to the bad guy. I said, say goodbye to the bad guy. I swear, half the crowd said goodbye to the bad guy. The main event was WWF champion Shawn Michaels, the company's top babyface, defending his title against real-life best friend Kevin Nash inside the WWF steel cage. The Kliq had discussed a plan for a final collective farewell, but they were wary of repercussions, especially for Triple H, who wasn't leaving. Shawn Michaels said, "We had discussed it. We're at the last day and it's a match between me and Kevin. The Garden's sold out for the first time and we don't know how long." Hunter comes up and goes, "Are we doing it?" I was like, "I don't know. Ask Vince if we can do it." We didn't want to get Hunter any heat. Shawn walked into McMahon's office along with myself and Scott. We said to Vince, "Hey, this is going to be the last time we're going to be in the Garden. At the end of this thing, do you mind if we come out as the Kliq and kinda hug, do a little curtain call?" Vince didn't have a problem with it. With what they interpreted as a green light from the boss, the stage was set. The cage match concluded as many expected, Shawn Michaels retaining his championship after hitting sweet chin music on Diesel. Michaels celebrated, Nash sold the effects of the super kick while lying on the canvas, and then the script went out the window. First, Scott Hall, who remember wrestled Triple H earlier, walked down the aisle and entered the cage. At this point, some fans might have been confused, but Michaels and Hall were both fan favourites. Their interaction wasn't what anyone would call the breaking of kayfabe. I go strolling down the aisleway. I've got a good history with Shawn, particularly in Madison Square Garden. I go stepping through that cage and the people are rumbling. I'm looking at Shawn like I might jump your little ass. He just runs over and hugs me, which kinda kills the whole story I was telling. Hall and Michaels shared an embrace, exchanging the Kliq's trademark Turkish wolf hand gesture before Hall raised Shawn's arm. Michaels then went over to Kevin and he helped him to his feet. Nash got up, these two also hugged, and now we're pushing the boundaries because, yes, Kevin and HBK were on-screen buddies for a very long time, but this had all changed following Shawn's championship win at Mania 12. They had a very physical match at In Your House Good Friends Better Enemies, and as you all know, wrestling rivals don't display any kind of camaraderie, never mind hugging it out in the middle of the ring. As Nash, Hall and Michaels stood together, the arena witnessed the most blatant breach of kayfabe being shattered to pieces. Hunter Hearst Helmsley, the Connecticut Blue Blood who had no on-screen affiliation with the babyface champion Shawn Michaels, walked down to the ring. He entered the cage and, without hesitation, he hugged HBK. For the New York crowd, this was unheard of. Babyfaces and heels were not supposed to fraternize in this manner, and I know we all talk about the New York crowd being smart and all, but some New York minds were most definitely blown when all this happened. I mean, that unlikable Hunter Hearst Helmsley guy, Shawn Michaels, the dude everyone loved. Everything up to this point kinda made sense from a kayfabe perspective. You could get away with HBK, Diesel and Razor embracing while just writing it off as HBK and Diesel reigniting their friendship after the cage match and Razor just being a happy babyface. But an embrace between a babyface and a heel that shared minimal storyline interaction on TV except for throwaway matches against each other, this broke the fourth wall in a big way. Hunter raised Shawn's arm in the air, they then approached Hall and Nash. All four men displayed the Kliq hand gesture and then embraced in a group hug. They continued to milk it by celebrating in the ring afterwards while the crowd went crazy. For those few minutes, the storylines, the feuds, the very fabric of pro wrestling's carefully maintained illusion were all cast aside. It was simply four friends, Shawn, Kevin, Scott and Paul, sharing a personal yet very public goodbye. And that reminds me, if you're wondering where Sean Waltman was, by the way, he was in rehab. Just thought I'd mention that. Judging by the poor video quality we have of the curtain call, fans in the Garden went nuts for this. There's some confusion too, for sure, and you best believe a lot of fans were wondering what on earth was going on. But all in all, it's a huge sustained MSG pop when all this goes down. It was four guys who'd been fucking through hell and back, through so many years, 1,000 days at least on the road together. We hugged and we went to the corners. I looked out in the crowd and there were people crying because everyone knew we were leaving. While the four men in the ring felt they were sharing a heartfelt, if unconventional, farewell, the reaction backstage was immediate and pretty severe. Many wrestlers, officials, and long-time industry personnel who revered the traditions of the business were horrified by what they just witnessed. The idea of babyfaces and heels publicly acknowledging their real-life friendships in such a manner, especially at Madison Square Garden, was seen as deeply disrespectful. These days, everybody's kinda smart as to what's going on. Back then, even after all the exposés and 2020s and all that bullshit, the business was still somewhat protected. Damn sure it was protected at Madison Square Garden in a steel cage. All of a sudden, the Kliq goes out there and hugs, and I'm thinking, what the fuck's going on from behind the curtain? I can't believe what I'm seeing. Madison Square Garden's hollow ground. You don't break kayfabe back in the day at Madison Square Garden. This wasn't just disapproval from a few disgruntled individuals. There was a genuine sense among many that the curtain call undermined the entire presentation of professional wrestling. For many, it killed what pro wrestling was. Kevin Nash himself acknowledged the immediate negative vibe when they returned backstage, particularly from other wrestlers and Vince McMahon. I remember Davey Boy Smith was one of the guys that went right to Vince and said, "What the f*** is that? You're going to let these guys break kayfabe? These two sons of bitches are going down south and you're going to let them kill the garden off?" It just steamrolled from there. By the time we got through the curtain, Vince was standing there. As we walked by, I looked at him and he didn't turn his back on me, but he just turned it enough to feel kinda like, "F*** you, Nash." This silent disapproval from McMahon was a stark contrast to the permission the Kliq believed they had received beforehand. The perception among many traditionalists was that this was an act of self-indulgence by four top stars, and it was detrimental to everyone else who played by the rules. It was seen as the Kliq once again doing whatever the hell they wanted, and it was like these boys were getting special treatment. Take Bruce Pritchard, for example, who seemed to take this all really personally when he said, "I felt like it was a slap in the face to the business. I felt it was a slap in the face to Vince McMahon, to Vince's father, and to his whole family." The Kliq members, however, maintained that their intentions were pure, driven by friendship and a desire to acknowledge the fans, not to damage the business or disrespect its traditions intentionally. The problem here is that no one wanted to believe the Kliq due to their history, and besides, no one broke kayfabe back then. No one. Doesn't matter if you're Shawn Michaels, Hulk Hogan, or Dwayne Gill. You don't mess around with what pro wrestling is just because you want to say goodbye to your friends. In retrospect, was it the right thing to do? Probably not, but it was never done with any kind of malice. It was asked for, and it was done out of respect for the guys. What we had talked about in the car was that this isn't the end of the Kliq. This is just divide and conquer. We were going down south and take over the other company while you guys still run this one. We basically looked at it like the Kliq is going to run the wrestling world. Take this shit global. A lot of guys were really angry, like we were trying to hurt the business. I want to go on record and say that was nobody's intention. It just kind of morphed into this big thing. I felt I was never going to see these fans in Madison Square Garden again, and I wanted to say goodbye to them and thanks for their support. Despite their explanations, the damage control within the WWF had to begin. Vince McMahon, who years later would offer a more nuanced public take on the event by acknowledging the audience's enjoyment, was in a difficult position. He couldn't ignore such a public middle finger to wrestling's core principle, especially when other wrestlers and WWF employees were putting on the pressure. It wasn't my idea, it's not what I would do, but maybe it was the right thing to do. Then again, maybe it was the wrong thing to do because it broke the mold of the way someone leaves. Nonetheless, when the curtain call took place, it was something extemporaneous. It was also something the audience enjoyed, by the way. Hall and Nash were on their way to WCW. Their WWF careers were over. Shawn Michaels, as the reigning WWF champion and the company's marquee attraction, was deemed too valuable to punish. This left one member of the Kliq to face the music for the group's controversial farewell, Hunter Hearst Helmsley. The repercussions for him would be significant, yet, ironically, they would set in motion a chain of events that would fundamentally alter the course of WWF and usher in its most successful period. Vince kind of had his back to the wall and somebody had to pay the price for it. I took it all. When all that went down, I took the brunt of the heat for it because I was the only one that could. Kevin and Scott were leaving, Shawn was world champ, what are they going to do to him? I took the heat, no problem. As I was leaving Vince's office after a thorough ass chewing, I looked back at him and said, "Let me ask you this, Vince. If this is so wrong, if lifting that curtain is so wrong, why was it the loudest thing at Madison Square Garden that night? It was sold out. The biggest reaction by far was that the business is changing, it's passing people by, and they're not seeing it yet. He said, "You might be right, but that doesn't change where we are right now. The punishment is what it is." That was the truth. The business is changing. Fast forward, the internet comes in and everybody knows what we do. They know the real stuff. They know who's married and who's in relationships, or at least they think they do. Half the stuff on the internet is wrong, but it's all out there and they know how this works. Before the curtain call, Hunter Hearst Helmsley was on a clear upward trajectory. Vince McMahon had significant plans for the Connecticut Blue Blood, recognizing his in-ring talent and dedication. The 1996 King of the Ring tournament, an annual event that had previously been used to elevate certain superstars, was earmarked for Hunter. A King of the Ring victory for Helmsley would have been his first major step in becoming a main event player, but his participation in the MSG farewell changed everything. Hall and Nash were going to WCW, Shawn Michaels was the WWF champion who seemed to get away with murder anyway, so with no one else to punish, the blame landed squarely on Hunter. He was the newest member of the Kliq, the one with the least established main event drawing power at that specific moment, and therefore he was the most expendable in terms of immediate top-line booking. As Triple H recalls it, Vince said Hunter would have to eat shit and like the taste of it, and the first bite Triple H was going to take was in form of his scheduled King of the Ring victory getting pulled. Then, for months after the curtain call, Hunter was often relegated to losing matches. He had less prominent spots on the cards, and at house shows, he went on a severe losing streak against the likes of Mark Mero, Yokozuna, Jake Roberts, and Savio Vega. It was a period of professional penance that served as a stark contrast to the backstage power once carried by the Kliq. That being said, this disciplinary action had an unattended, monumental consequence. With Helmsley out of the King of the Ring picture, a new opportunity arose for another wrestler who was beginning to build momentum, and that other wrestler was none other than Stone Cold Steve Austin. Austin seized this unexpected opportunity with both hands. He won the King of the Ring tournament after defeating Jake Roberts in the final, and he cut a historic promo after his victory. You know exactly what that promo was all about. It was the birth of Austin 316. Had Triple H not appeared inside the steel cage at MSG, the future of wrestling could have looked very, very different. While Stone Cold began rising up the ranks and getting booked much more favourably, Hunter Hearst Helmsley endured his backstage punishment. The curtain call, therefore, had a dual, almost paradoxical effect. It led to the temporary downfall of one Kliq member, but directly paved the way for the meteoric rise of the WWF's biggest drawn superstar. Triple H, however, couldn't be denied forever. He gradually worked his way back up the cards, and he would eventually become a huge star in his own right. Funnily enough, his real-life punishment for the curtain call eventually became integrated into his on-screen character development, particularly as he transformed into the edgier Triple H, a founding father of D-Generation X along with Shawn Michaels. He would often allude to being held down and the sacrifices he made for his friends. I mean, he outright stated as much the night after he won the 1997 King of the Ring. And this blurring the lines between reality and storyline was becoming a characteristic of the up-and-coming Attitude Era. The most famous callback Hunter made to the curtain call happened during a well-remembered interview with Jim Ross. This one aired on Sunday Night Heat, and it was also the genesis of Triple H's game character.
This is about me. I don't need to be in a Kliq anymore. I don't need to be in DX anymore. This is about me. It's about me reaching my goals. You know, and while we're at it, this goes back a long way, JR. This goes back to the Kliq. This goes back to Madison Square Garden. Me walking in the ring and saying goodbye to my friends. It's about 4 years ago, Madison Square Garden. I walked to the ring to say goodbye to my friends. Kevin Nash, Scott Hall, Shawn Michaels. Who got punished for that, JR? Me. I did. You know why? Because you didn't have the nobody in the office had that to do it to anybody else. They did it to me. Why? Because I was the easy one. I was the one that would take it. Good old Triple H, he'll rise to the occasion later on. Don't worry about it. He'll come through. Well, you know what? That makes me sick in my stomach. Every time I look at you guys, it makes me sick to think what you did to me, holding me back. You guys talk about being students of the game. I am the game, JR. There is nobody that eats, sleeps, or breathes this business more than me. And now it's my time to prove that to the world. SummerSlam is my time to take what is mine, and that is becoming the WWF champion.
Beyond individual careers, the curtain call incidents often cited as a turning point in the broader presentation of pro wrestling, not just the WWF, but the business as a whole. With the internet making backstage news much more accessible, the old ways of strictly guarding kayfabe were becoming increasingly difficult to maintain. The curtain call, while condemned by many within the industry, was a very public tear in that veil. While kayfabe was far from dead, the incident undeniably contributed to an environment where the lines between the on-screen fiction and off-screen reality were increasingly and often intentionally blurred, creating a more complex and, for many, a more compelling television product. The price for one group's unscripted goodbye was paid by one man, but the dividends, in form of Stone Cold Steve Austin, D-Generation X, the shift in tone known as the Attitude Era, all this would ultimately redefine the WWF. The departure of Hall and Nash directly led to the formation of the New World Order in WCW, an angle that dominated pro wrestling and saw WCW defeat WWF in the Monday Night War for 86 consecutive weeks. The NWO was groundbreaking. The group forced McMahon to fast-track a change in how the WWF did TV and how McMahon conducted business on a grand scale. But in terms of what the curtain call did for the WWF, mainly the rise of Stone Cold, the D-Generation X stable featuring Shawn Michaels and Triple H, and the overall shift towards more reality-based storylines, this all served as the seeds McMahon needed in order to fight WCW and usher in the WWF's successful Attitude Era. Triple H's role in all this really stands out. He was the man who got punished for the incident, but he eventually ascended to the very top of the company, both in the ring and behind the scenes. He went from being told to eat shit and like the taste of it, to now overseeing the entire WWE creative operation, which is quite the upgrade, I'm sure you'd agree. If you're someone who believes that everything happens for a reason, then the curtain call is one of those incidents you can really appreciate due to its incredible domino effect on the entire wrestling business. The Kliq members, despite their separate and often difficult paths, remain connected in some way or another. Their friendship did last, and it looks like those friendships will be forever right up until the very end. No matter what you may think of the Kliq, that kind of brotherhood is rare in pro wrestling. To wrap it up, the curtain call was more than just four friends saying goodbye. It was a moment where the carefully constructed facade of pro wrestling cracked, and through that crack, a new era was born. Whether it was a disrespectful act of defiance, like so many old-timers say it was, or a much-needed catalyst for necessary change, its impact was, and still is, undeniable. In a world built on scripts, it was an unscripted moment that changed everything.
Damn, I feel amazing. 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 Damn, I'm in the matrix. My mind